The Last Guardian may end up being the most divisive game of the year, and it's hard to blame anybody who feels that way. It has been over 7 years since the game was first announced, and after being in development hell for so long, it's bound to have elements and mechanics that many players might find archaic. Common criticisms I have heard surround the game's platforming and environment. Some say that the game's look and feel might have been novel at the beginning of the last console generation, but not midway into the current one. As well, there have been complaints about framerate drops, the awkward camera, and getting your companion to follow your orders. I can't deny that these issues could potentially compromise some people's enjoyment of the game. As for myself, however, I view a video game to be a success when its positives outweigh its negatives. Even when I acknowledge the game's flaws, I personally still view the game to be a tremendous achievement. Let me put it to you this way. The previous game from Team Ico was Shadow of the Colossus, my second favorite game of all time, right behind Metal Gear Solid 2. Look on any top 10 list of PS2 games or top 10 all-time list of games, and you'll almost definitely find Shadow of the Colossus. That game is the reason why the hype for The Last Guardian held steady for roughly a decade. What I and many others wanted out of The Last Guardian, what we dreamed about for years, was a return to what made Shadow of the Colossus great. And for myself at least, that's exactly what I got. I got an emotional journey through a foreign, dangerous, magical land. I got puzzles that had the right amount of difficulty. I got environments and animations with an awe-inspiring amount of detail. And above all, I got an intriguing story. What I enjoy most about Team Ico's games is the way they present a narrative. They tell you just enough to leave you satisfied, but nowhere near enough for you to understand fully what is going on. The game forces you to reflect and consider every sight and sound during your journey, so you can fulfill that desperate need for closure. The past couple of weeks, I've seen people online having difficulty making the pieces fit. I figure, after having mulled over this game since I finished playing it, I should offer those people my explanation. Needless to say, this is just my interpretation of what was happening in the game, and there is enough subjectivity to the story where other people's explanations could be just as legitimate. Hopefully, my perspective should grant a few of you satisfaction, and in case it wasn't obvious already, there are huge spoilers ahead. In my view, the entirety of this game can be explained by focusing on one key plot device, the barrels of goo. Understanding where this turquoise-colored material comes from and how it relates to everything in the game helps bring the puzzle pieces together better than any other explanation I've read online. A long time ago, an ancient civilization happened upon this crater, which the game refers to as the Nest. Within the Nest, it discovered a god. This god gave unto the people a substance with magical properties, a substance that had the potential to give life, a substance that could help build industrial contraptions. Once the first man or woman decided to taste this substance, they were overcome by an ominous yet holy feeling. The voice of this god spoke to them from within. It said that if the people did the Holy One's bidding, then the material would be theirs to enjoy for eternity. Once the civilization agreed to this pact, they consumed the substance and came under the control of this ancient deity. They were ordered to forge this material with other earthly elements in order to create armored drones, magical keys, and implements that give off light, and machines that would help spread this god's influence. Over many years, a city was built around this deity, with the rough earthly architecture differing greatly from the smooth white tower that their god occupied. However, like any other material that occupies the mortal world, the civilization began to run out of the turquoise goo. When they asked their god how they would be able to produce more of this remarkable substance, it replied with a shocking answer: sacrifices. Reluctantly, the civilization agreed to do this, and then they understood where the substance came from. When sacrificing a human being, the god divided their souls into two parts, light and shadow. By taking the shadow part of their soul, the light part was condensed into matter for the civilization to use. This barbarity divided the civilization, causing several who still had some semblance of free will to leave. This worried and angered the master of the valley because over time, even those who were most loyal to their god were too grieved by the loss of their friends and family members. In a last-ditch effort, the master decided for his remaining followers to craft several idols out of rock and clay. In a magical spell, the material combined with the rock and clay and gave birth to the Trico, a beast that was distinctly foreign to both legend and the processes of evolution. A beast that would carry out the deity's bidding once all of his followers were gone. Granted, this part might seem a bit far-fetched to you, but for those of you who have played Shadow of the Colossus, I ask you to think back to when you were stabbing those poor creatures with your light-giving sword. Do you remember those cracks in the Colossi skin? Do you not remember a turquoise glow from underneath? And when those Colossi died, did they not turn to rock and clay? To keep these wild beasts under control and forbid them from turning against their master, several colored mirrors were placed at key points throughout the nest. The colors of their soul projected through their eyes would be projected back at them, and the evil these colors represented inspired a deep fear from within. The Master of the Valley's remaining followers sacrificed themselves to serve for eternity, with their shadows animating the armored knights littered throughout the nest. And finally, the nest was sealed from the outside world. Nobody comes in, and nobody goes out. After eons and eons, the remnants of this ancient civilization are still moving in the opposite direction of the nest, but no matter how far they go, the Tricos are still able to fly to their settlements, silently snatch up unsuspecting humans, and sacrifice them to their god in exchange for this addictive, magical turquoise substance. Only a bolt of lightning would temporarily break the master's control over one of its beasts, producing a true individual. Led by another boy who has broken free from this sadistic ritual, we embark on an emotional journey where we see just how much power two individuals can have over a collective of hundreds. Now that ends my interpretation of this game, but before I end this video, I figure I need to address one thing I mentioned before, a thing that may have inspired more questions than one might have had before watching this video. I made a connection between this game and Shadow of the Colossus. For those of you who have played both games, you might be starting to see the same thing I'm seeing, a connection of some sorts. After all, the game's lead designer, Fumito Ueda, confirmed that Team Ico's two previous games share the same world. Who's to say that The Last Guardian doesn't as well?